Hi everyone, welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. We're going to be discussing today the 5 conversations that make ABM work. My name's Simon Prince. I'm the portfolio manager here at the Scale Up Collective. And for this session today, I'm going to be joined by Ronan O'Duffy, who's the growth manager for the Scale Up Collective. We're going to be chatting around some of the themes and conversations that need to be had by the marketing and the growth teams to ensure your ABM works. Hey Ronan, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. Good. Thanks. Excited to
Good.
talk.
Excellent. Yeah, me too. So there's quite a bit to cover. So should we get into it? I'm going to kick things off, if I may, selfishly. The first question that I think we really need to get into is one that's based around maths. And it's one that is, do we really know the numbers that are going to be required to make the ABM a success? So most of marketing, rightly so, like ABM, is revenue based. And therefore, that's a really good place to start. Building the commercial and understanding the revenue required enables you to back up everything from there. So let's start with the numbers you need to hit. You calculate off the required revenue, the ACV, and that builds you the deal requirement. And then you work back upwards through your win rates to define the pipeline, right? Makes sense. From there, you can model the weighted pipeline requirements and check that against the budget and build a realistic view of the funnel. So
Mm,
starting commercial output, I think is the number one objective for the campaign.
yeah.
But once you get to that top, what else do you think that needs to be said, or the conversation needs to go from there, Ronan? What's the next bit that we need to get into?
Yeah. So they're like the high level numbers. And then I think the conversation comes up of like, how are we actually going to execute this? So we need to know like, what are the benchmarks of the channels we're actually going to be using? Because sometimes you can have conversations, and if people haven't been using a specific channel in a while, for example, like cold email or like LinkedIn outreach or LinkedIn ads, they don't 100% know what the numbers are around that. So, like, they might overestimate what the reply rate is going to be from their cold emails, and that can completely change like the metrics down the road. So, we really need to know that in the maths as well. So, knowing your benchmarks, knowing that we're probably not going to hit much higher than 3 to 4% reply rates on cold email. We're probably not going to hit much higher than maybe at most 50% of replies being actually interested if our targeting's on point. And then vice versa with LinkedIn, knowing that it will be slightly higher because it's more personalized and people can actually see you're a real human. You'll probably be looking at more like 40% connection rates in a good situation, maybe 30% reply rates in a good situation. But knowing those numbers is super important. And also knowing like how scalable each channel is as well and when you should use each channel. For example, like if you have a huge target addressable market, then cold email might be the way forward. But assuming that you're going after very specific accounts, then we also need to like factor in, is it worth using cold email for this if we're only after like 100 people or so? That will, like, the maths behind that is something that might get ignored at the start, but I think it is something really important to talk about at the start, because you don't want to leave it to the end when everyone's really excited to get going. They love the numbers at the start, and then we realize, oh wow, we're actually going to miss that target by a long way. So yeah,
Mm,
those are some really key ones to think about.
yeah.
The maths also tells you how creative you need to be as well. Is like, if you have a huge market and a scalable channel, you can probably focus on that. But if you have a really specific group of companies you need to go after, and you've only got a few chances to get in front of them, you might have to get more creative. Like, if we want to get in front of them as much as possible, we might have to layer different channels on top of each other. So,
Yeah.
like cold calling, LinkedIn content, LinkedIn thought leadership ads, everything to get in front of them as many times as possible, basically.
Well, don't go too into that because we'll come on to that later because that's one of the other key
Yeah,
questions.
true, true.
Also, I guess crucially, we've got to kind of know how long the sales cycles are, right? Because they determine sometimes, obviously, the frequency that we can deliver these wins in, but also the types of channels that we'll be using. So that's something we'll come on to channels in a bit. So basically the summary of that is the maths is super important, right? We've got to be clear. We've got to know our revenue. We've got to know the pipeline requirements. We've got to get a realistic view of the pipeline by weighted coverage. And
Yeah,
then we've got to be super clear on the realistic benchmarks that we can, for the various channels that we can deploy. So I guess the sort of the maths is the fundamental building block. So the next question then, I would say, still isn't about tactics. I'm going to be quite insistent on that one. It's coming into like, are we marketers and growth leaders aligned? And like, I think so. The real question is, are marketing and sales truly aligned, or are we just kind of sharing lists? because agreeing on the revenue is one thing, but actually agreeing on the accounts, the channels, the expectations is completely separate, right? So you mentioned earlier a bit about the TAM, but I think that the real key is building out the service obtainable market, which is who do we think we can realistically go after, given the size of sales teams, the amount of budget that we have, the sales cycles we need to go through.
Yeah.
But then once we've got that, we can then start to realistically give the expectations of the channels to the sales teams. So how would you go about setting those expectations? And like, how would you go about defining those for the sales, aligning the sales team really with the growth marketing function?
Yeah, so I think the main one is once we can get excited around which channels we're going to use, but it's the question around whether our team and our sales team and our marketing team can actually deliver on each channel. Like, do we have the expertise there? Because expecting someone to just randomly, I'll just take cold email as a random example. It's like expecting someone who's never done it before to understand everything that's needed, not to land in the spam folder, is like a big ask. And so we need to think about like what skills do they have and what do we realistically think we can like deliver on at high quality. So I think that's a big one. And then aligning like the full motion with the sales team. So having those conversations with the sales team around what has worked in the past, around like what's your day to day, how many touch points you're using, and like understanding that, like making sure marketing understands that as well, so that you can find a way to create what's worked before in your like flow. Because if you just do lots of random activity, but none of it's aligned with what's worked for sales before on the actual deals they've closed, then it could be you basically just like spinning your wheels and you might just be doing lots of activity and not moving the needle, basically.
So really understanding the cadences then and the
Yeah.
handoffs and the actions through is super crucial, and making sure that marketing or growth is learning from the sales. That's another key question to be had, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because like marketing could really help out sales if they knew what they were doing. So that's why like the feedback loop has to be quite quick.
Okay. And I guess another thing is we've got to be clear on sort of the messaging, and are we agreed on the buying committee, for example? Like, is it going to be one person within an organization? It generally isn't for
Mm.
ABM, but are we all agreed on how sales are going to target and how we're going to influence the buying committee completely? So it's not. So I guess mapping out stakeholder needs and what they watch and what they listen to and understand where they get their information from is going to be crucial as well. And making sure
Yeah.
sales understands that. So I guess the key thing is then sort of transparency, really, isn't it? It's making sure that we are fully aware of the motion as a whole, not just as in our part of that, and how marketing sits very much alongside sales to deliver these tactics. So
Yeah.
once we've aligned on that, then right. So here's the next bit we can move on to. We've aligned on. We understand the numbers. We get the budget. We understand sales and marketing are aligned. The thing this is the bit that I've learned most in the last few years is like, how are we actually going to cut through? Like, how are we going to create an offer or create some noise that is meaningful in market? Like, we know that ABM, especially high value, isn't just about closing the deal. It's about getting permission to enter the conversation, really, isn't it? It's about starting to force your way into that conversation. So I love the phrase you share that phrase, but you've got a really nice phrase that you use in terms of how we do that. And for me, that tactic is crucial. What have you been learning recently about the offer and the offer building as part of this sequencing?
Yeah, 100%. So like the key difference here is thinking about your offer as in you're speaking to cold traffic here. These are people that have never heard of you before. This is completely different to closing a deal from a referral or from your network where the trust is already baked in there basically. Like with this, you kind of have to win their attention and win their time. And so I like to split it into two different offers. You've got your core offer that you're trying to sell. Maybe that's your enterprise platform or like a yearly subscription. Could be a six figure contract value, sorry. But no one, if they don't know you, is going to be willing to give you 20 minutes of their time just for no reason so you can pitch them. So what we like to do is basically build this like painkiller offer at the front of the funnel that is completely free. It's like a front end offer, and it's something that there is tangible and valuable to them and solves a problem for them that they're going to get in return of jumping on a call with you. And this is the reason I've started really like hammering home on this, is because like recently I've realized the cold emails I respond to or the outreach I respond to is a lot of the time not based around like how personalized or how much AI personalization there was done on it. There's usually no personalization in it. It's usually quite short, but what they're offering is so valuable to me and so specific to me that I would be 100% willing to give 30 minutes of my time to jump on a call, hear them
Mm,
out, and get that at the end of it. And I think that's the key bit here is like, we're not looking to close the deal on that first contact. We're looking to open the conversation, build a relationship with them, and there'll be many, many more touch points down the line before we close that 100K deal. But
mm.
it's just about winning that first bit.
Piers, we've got a few connection issues with Ronan. Apologies. So I think he was summarising.
I think I'm
There we
back.
go. Technical issues. Brilliant. So sorry, you were just saying. So it's about really understanding the pain of the audience, building a need that delivers the painkiller, and that's the phrase I like. The painkiller for the pain,
Yeah.
like the Nurofen or the paracetamol for the pain that they have. But I guess it's really understanding what it is they're wanting from you. So like, why are they getting in touch? Why are they looking to you as a solution? And why are they wanting to engage with your business? So therefore, you can build the painkiller around that. What have been some good examples that you've seen in terms of like delivering that pain and the painkiller, or solutioning on that pain rather with the painkiller?
Yeah, I mean, any lead magnet works. So, like the way I like to think about like some of the easiest lead magnets you can do if you're, for example, a service company, is you can cut off the first bit of your service and give it away for free. And so the key thing here is it needs to be something that the prospect knows people usually pay money for and they actually find valuable. If they don't see it as something that people normally pay money for, or it's super like commoditized, then it's not a good lead magnet. So yeah, I mean, ones that have worked for me is basically maybe someone has somehow figured out that I'm working on a certain client or a certain campaign, and they've gone and actually built me out an entire list of that target addressable market. I mean, that saves me tons of time. I'm definitely willing to jump on a 20 minute call around that. But there's tons of them. I mean, if you were like let's say an ad creative agency and you said we'll build you 20 specific creatives for your company for free, but all you have to do is jump on the 30-minute sales call. I mean, that's tangible value there. Like people pay money for that. So if you're in the market for ad creative, then that is something that you'd be willing to open the conversation around. Obviously, when it comes to like B2B SaaS and enterprise SaaS, you have to be a little bit more creative because you can't just like cut off part of that product and show it, but you could angle it around like your expertise in the market. You could
Mm,
angle it around like giving feedback on you've done 2,000 projects or you're 20 years in that industry, or connecting them with someone who they want to connect with. There's a lot of creative ways you could do it, but I think it's just about like they have to see it as valuable to be willing to jump on a
So,
call.
so really, it's about the value exchange, then, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about making sure that, particularly with senior stakeholders, that they feel that they're getting something back for their time given to you that isn't just a sales pitch. It's actually delivering the pain killer for the pain that they were probably experiencing. Okay, cool. So far then we've built the audience, we've defined the maths, we've developed an offer. So what would you say is next within this sort of line of questioning? What's the next question that we need to be focusing on today?
Yeah, I think the key one is, and this is like what everyone's talking about, is where does AI fit in or where does automation fit into the whole process? So this is quite an important one because I think you can almost take it too far and you can almost use too much AI at the start of something and ruin the bits that were working before. So I think that it kind of goes back to that conversation you were having with the sales team around like what has worked before in like your manual process and what are like the key high value tasks you do that require manual work, and what are the ones that just waste loads of your time and stop you from doing more of the key work. So like
Mm,
when you find out what those manual ones are, maybe it's like research before sales calls, or maybe it's just research in general that AI could help out with and automate. Then they're the bits that you definitely want to automate. It might even just be like the sequencing. So tracking when someone has viewed your profile, sending that to a clay table and basically checking if they're an ICP fit and then automatically reaching out. It could be something like that. But I think the really key, like big needle mover activities that the sales team do, you don't want to automate it that too early. Like there is value in doing certain things manually. Prime example of
mm,
that would be like you see on LinkedIn people using AI to comment on other people's posts, right?
yeah.
That's not a good look for anyone and it doesn't work. Whereas if you're using AI, to scan LinkedIn to find relevant posts for you to manually comment on and give your expertise on, then that is a really good use of your time. I think it's just like that balancing act.
Mm. So get don't automate or don't like yeah. I mean, automation is one thing and AI is the other, so we can separate them kind of
Yeah.
right. So don't automate away the real high value tasks that there is tangible meaning in you doing it,
Yeah.
but do things like research, discovery, automation of and intelligence and enrichment, for example, like data enrichment and things like that
Yeah.
can all be done.
It's
Okay,
almost
cool.
like avoiding automating away the human touch because,
Yeah.
like, there's so much AI automation and, like, spam going on that that human touch can be the thing that, like, wins you the deal.
Okay. So I guess a sort of rule of thumb would be like automate the operations and automate intelligence gathering, but like the actual sort of the nuance or the sort of the delivery needs to be done through human touch.
Yeah,
That's kind
100.
of like, okay, cool. Where do you think and I'm gonna put you on the spot here, where do you think it's done particularly badly? We talked about personalization or we talked about the AI helping to scrape and enrich data for personalization. Where's it not working at the moment? Because that's another thing we need to so we know the territories we have to avoid.
Yeah, so I wanna be, like, careful on this one because there are some people executing this really, really well with the personalization. Like,
Yeah.
that is literally probably the top 5%, if not less. Most people with this personalization stuff, they're using very, very generic personalization that just doesn't add any value. They might have like looked on their LinkedIn and saw that they went to the same university or something. Like personalization like that is just not it's not a needle mover in your messaging. You'd be better off like doing less personalization and just improving your offer and doing no personalization basically. But the personalization that does work really well, I think vertical SaaS is a good example of this, is if you're really good at like GTM engineering and you can scan the web and find companies that are like pain qualified. So you have found evidence they definitely have this pain, then using personalization in that situation to make it very relevant to the situation they're in and the data you found is like, that's really, really good. So there's just like complete opposites of like people getting it really right and people doing it really wrong.
Yeah. I guess it's like using AI to do the data variables and the data inputs
Yeah,
verification, and then building out processes that can be automated off the back of that, and personalization can be one, right? So
yeah,
I guess it's a trade off, and sometimes it speeds stuff up, but I've seen it executed where it's actually slowing people down. They're getting sort of muddled up with the AI, the hallucinations, the sort of the expectations of delivery, and failing to get the basics done.
yeah.
Go old school basics right and then build out and automate away what the manual stuff that isn't really high value tasks.
Yeah, I mean, the offer does the heavy lifting in every
Yeah.
situation. The personalization is kind of like the cherry on top.
Okay. Cool. So like we're clear on how to use AI now. It's about accelerating signals, research prep, so on. I think now everyone's got the same tools and everyone's got the same and the tools are more accessible than ever before. How are we making sure that we're actually standing out? Like that's I think a really interesting question. It goes a bit back to the offer, right? Like how are we building creativity into the offer and how are we utilizing multi-channels and creative output to really cut through? Like what are the core, I'd say, what are the core channels that we would think about for an ABM? And then how are we ensuring that the question is, how do we ensure that actually we're standing out using those channels,
Yeah.
right? So like the creativity should be, we've got the budget and we know the limitations of what we can and can't do with creativity, but it needs to be different to what's available in market. So what do you see are the core requirements for the ABM motion? And then we can talk a little bit about how we can maybe use them differently than before.
Yeah, the core ones, like if you're on a fairly lean budget, is going to be a combination of like email, LinkedIn content, LinkedIn automations where you're basically connecting with all the decision makers, a bit of LinkedIn outreach, maybe some LinkedIn paid ads on like some of your thought leadership content, and then maybe a bit of cold calling if you've got the resources to do that. So they're like the classics that like you're probably going to be running those. But the creative part is just like going kind of back to the old school methods. So, like we were talking about before, when we were talking about like, don't automate the human touch out of the sales team, don't try and like automate everything. It's just simple things like gifting, like going back to sending a personalized gift to someone. The chances are they're just not receiving that kind of thing anymore now that everyone's doing just like automated things. I mean, in real life experiences, inviting all your prospects to like a 5-star dinner, I mean, it's not cheap, but you're probably going to get a lot more leverage out of that than you might have done from like your LinkedIn ads budget or some outreach.
And I guess you only be doing that if you've got the permission of the budget in the first place.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's fine. I've got a few years on you, Ronan, so I really like the idea of going old school again and doing sort of the direct mail, the personalised, the in real life. I think everyone's crying out for these genuine connection experiences rather than just necessarily AI automation. So
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I've got a couple I can share, but what are a couple of examples that you've seen recently in terms of creativity as part of the ABM sequencing that have stood out for you?
Yeah, a big one I've been seeing recently is like this guy, I can't remember his exact name, but he's talking about like he makes the ultimate outreach, and it's basically where he creates an entire movie, like a 15-minute movie for that specific person, and it's high production value. I think he edits it with AI to make everything look like higher production, but yeah, super high production, like there's comedy in it. It's very personalized to that one person, and then it's sort of like a pitch at the end. But it's so crazy that it's like no one would have ever seen that before. He can then post that on his LinkedIn. The guy's getting tagged in it loads, and they're like, "Have you seen this?" It goes a bit viral. I think that's like a good example of one that I've seen that works really well. And I mean, he's closing those clients, so it's clearly working.
Yeah, I think that's nice, isn't it? It's like the channels are the distribution, but look, what's the message
Yeah,
that's going to through? What's going to make you stand out? And I'm starting to see more and more people do it. You do it through story based, through like video, through humor and comedy, rather than just like volume based. So I really like the fact that AI is kind of forcing us, and automation, and is forcing us to go and think a little different, and creativity is coming back into this. So I'm definitely going to be pushing hard with clients to say about creativity and how we cut through there,
yeah,
because I think everyone's doing the same thing and everyone can do the same thing. So those people that have a little bit of imagination, and those people that trust a process and trust the budget and trust the teams they're around will definitely win in this space. Cool. Right, we're coming towards the end actually. So I mean, I think we've covered quite a lot there. And thanks, Ronan. That's super useful for sort of context. And I think some really, really key things there. So, if we just recap quickly on what we feel, and this is obviously subjective, but what we feel are the key conversations. Like, you start with the maths, you've got to get the maths right. Yeah, we both agree that there's the maths on number one place to start. From there, you've got to make sure, therefore, your teams are aligned: marketing, go to market, sales, the lot. Then you can move into, well, what are we trying to deliver, and what is the mechanic that's going to get us noticed, and how are we going to get that in front of the person, and that kind of leads on to the creativity we were just talking about. And then how are we going to utilize these new tools? And automation isn't new, obviously, but AI and how AI can help speed that up is definitely playing a factor. But don't automate everything away. There's some stuff that you just get the benefit from having real life conversations, genuine connections. And then it's about channel and creativity. So how are you ensuring you've got the right blend of channels to cut through? How are you making sure you've got the right distribution methods in order to be sending out the great lead magnets, the idea, the comedy, the humor that actually cuts through? So I think there's some, and this works universally across a lot of different businesses. And I think there's some really nice examples you've given there. So thank you, Ronan. So that, yeah, like I said, that brings us to the end of the session. So thanks everyone for joining. If you've got any further questions or comments, or want to have a chat about any of this stuff, please do reach out to Scale Up, and we'll be happy to have a conversation with us. But until the next time, hope you all have a good day, and thanks very much for joining. Cheers, everyone.